well, and we'll go for a bit of a Q&A. So after this, we've got a break, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. But we'll take some questions first from the audience, and then we'll go to online. Bakumi, go for it.
Hi, my name is Bakumi, and my question is more directed towards Nav. My question is, like, you talked a bit about like the research you did by like going out into the community, but in terms of actually like making the washing machine, what type of like things did you look at? Did you look at articles? Did you speak to people who had already done similar things that you did? Like, what type of models did you look at? Thanks.
Yeah, and I'd love to bring in Ama into this as well, because I think as engineers, we're inherently problem solvers. So we think we know what the problem is, and then we try and solve it. But I think what's the most important thing, especially with something that I've never experienced in my life, hand washing clothes, it's important to understand the problem from the community. So we place a lot of emphasis on going into whether it's refugee camps or low-income areas, and trying to understand what their habits are, what soaps do they use, what water do they use, how long do they wash clothes for, what's the process, and we feed that back into our design. So if they have a large family, then they'll probably need a large drum, for example. If the user is on average a certain build or a certain age, then it's probably going to need a certain effort requirement. So these are how you build that back into the design. But the most important thing is you have to test it back into the community before you start pushing out larger volumes. And I'm sure that's the same process that you've gone through as well.
You mentioned over 1,000 people as well, like just different people along the journey that you went through.
But in your development as well, you do that.
Yeah, it's the exact same. I mean, there's a saying that I sometimes use, which is like, you can have like the most brilliant invention, and if it's not useful for anybody, no one's going to touch it. So, you know, you can build like a super rocket. If nobody can fit inside, they're not going anywhere, you know. And we use the same thing in medical engineering. Like one of my current projects I'm working on is for people on cancer, who have cancer and are on chemotherapy. And when we were building it, we thought, what's the problem? You know, they are on chemotherapy, their immune system's a little bit like suppressed, they're at risk of this condition that could kill them, so we want to build a solution. So we started working on a product. We were going to use lateral flow technology that you've heard of from COVID, and we were going to repurpose it to do the thing. But then what we didn't realize till we started talking to users is that sometimes when you're on chemotherapy, you don't have feeling in your fingers. You know, you might have something called peripheral neuropathy, which is like the big thing to say that your nerves are a little bit damaged, so you can't really feel. So if we gave them, like, we were thinking a really like fancy like device in their hand that they could like turn a dial and do things, and we realized that actually we need to take all of that away. We need to give them a big thing that they can turn, that even if they can't feel in their fingers, they can maybe use their palm to turn, right? And then you go back and you give it to them. So like Nav was saying, you need to test that back to make sure that that one little nugget that you think you've learned, did that actually make a difference? And then however many nuggets you've learned, you bring that all together and you make a device. And it does come through a lot of research, because once you found the problem or the thing that you think you want to fix, you need to find out what it is that you can use to solve that issue. You know, you might just be like, we repurpose lateral flow for this particular device, or you might take a robotic like feature and rebuild it into another device. It's just sort of doing that iterative learning and research, problem solving on your feet. You may not necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. You could potentially use what's already out there and bring all of those technologies together to create the solution that you're looking for. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think about how many apps I put on the iOS store. I put iOS, I was going to say I add Android as well. Android store as well, and it's just not used.
Do you still use Facebook?
Yeah, I don't use Facebook anymore. So it's really trying to test it. And I think your lesson one, Nav, was all around basically being obsessed with the problem and the people that you're trying to solve it for, because that solution will change, right? So I think that's a great question, and yes, great answers. Do we have anything from online? Yeah, we'll go for that. If we just use that mic, first. Okay, go over there. And then I'll come over to you.
This is a question from Sasha Lengfeld, who says, How can people get involved with the washing machine project? Is there a way that students can raise money or volunteer?
That would be amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for
How
that.
can they get a job at Washing Machine Project? I want a job.
You're welcome, George. No, thank you for the support. We really appreciate anything that people are willing to offer. We have a website, thewashingmachineproject.org. We're on all the socials, including Threads. Does anyone use Threads now? We have fundraising campaigns that are open, and we have distributions as well all over the world. We welcome interns and placement students all the time. We have a couple in our team already this year, and we're growing quite substantially over the next few years. So, welcome.
Amazing. Amazing. We've got a question. Well, yes, Iz first, and then go back. Oh, good cat.
All right, curveball question, because we have quite a mixed audience today. So we clearly have a bunch of people that are already kind of in the STEM space. We have a whole bunch of people who aren't. And I couldn't help but notice that every single one of the speakers said, I loved science and maths.
I didn't. Look, in my intro, I should have said I hated maths and science.
All right.
I didn't like it. I did it just because someone told me it would give me a bit more options. So I willed my way through that whole process personally. And, you know, a lot of people, for example, even school or uni, I could say I hated school, I hated uni, but I love options. I love the fact that I can use this and then be able to create a business with it. I remember looking at, I think, Cambridge Consultants or something. I saw you needed a first class in order to apply for the role. I was like, all right, I'm going to get the first class just so it can be an option. Does that make sense? So it was like maths and science was just so I can do the different options. For me personally, yeah, I didn't love either of those.
Just wondering for people in the audience who maybe don't love science and maths, but have been super inspired by what they've heard from the speakers, what are the other, like, how else could they get into it? Are those things absolutely essential?
It's a great question.
You go first, please.
I mean, so what you just said resonates quite well. You know, you want to have the option, so you don't necessarily have to love it. I mean, one of the things that I tell people about is, even to this day, I still do a lot of like sewing and arts, and you know, I've been sewing for dolls, and now I sew for humans. You know, like I've gone through the whole process. I do loads of arts and crafts. I spend a lot of time in my creative space. You know, so if that's what you do, whether it's music or art, whatever it is, that creation, you know, we have production engineers, we have animation people who are all about the arts. So, you know, the engineering field is quite wide and quite broad. I mean, we've said that many, many times. And, you know, you might want to do some of the stuff that we're doing. There are ways in. You can start somewhere and grow, because it's about the skills and it's about the experience that you build. So, you know, you can come through an apprenticeship. That does not necessarily mean that you've done sort of the sciences or the STEMs. You can come through different routes to enter. What my babysitter's just, I've just been able to sort of encourage, she was telling me about it, but she now does an apprenticeship, and she did no maths or science, and she's working at Marshall. Somebody mentioned Marshall. She's doing an apprenticeship through Marshall's, through one of their routes, and so she's coming through the space in a different way. So I think it's just important to say that while that's the traditional way, the maths and the sciences to come through, there are other ways. And actually, I think it's really important now that we explore the boundaries between arts and science. So there's, I don't know how many people have heard of STEAM, but it's an area that I really love, because when I think about the work that I do, whether I'm creating a product or a technology, it really has to be appealing, and that comes to my creative side, you know. So there's loads of areas there that you can explore, I think.
We've got, there's going to be, they've got a few more questions. So some questions, you might have to come to them in the break as well, just so I don't give you too short of a break and you're like, George, man, what are you doing? So just in case. So we'll take 2 more tops.
Hello, how's it going? So a question for Nav. How do you go about successfully translating an idea as big as like Divya's washing machine to actually creating a product?
Yeah, it's really good. I think it's a part. Can I just recap the question? How do we go about translating an idea into a product? Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's all about the story and who it's impacting. And also highlighting the problem that you're trying to fix with that idea. So finding a gap. Also doing some research to see what's out there already. for the first few months, I messaged all the washing machine companies around the world and said, can you come over and help me? And Richard Hewitt, the guy that I showed you, was the only one that said, hey, I'll come over. So that was the first thing before I tried to create my own thing. So that's really important. And then it requires so many things, not just engineering, but arts and the marketing side, the products. There's so many different streams to actually get this product into the hands of the user. It's just really complicated.
That's a great point, because if you look at most companies, the amount of people that are doing it links to your question, the actual engineering or technology is actually just a percentage. The rest is the marketing, the legal, which is so important for the product to actually be used by the masses or whoever it's designed for. So
and Mo's a really good example of that, where he studied aerospace engineering. Now he's doing social media.
It's the best example right here.
Technical know-how, but applying it to storytelling. I think that's really important.
One more question. Got a question here.
There's a lady there as well.
Where is it?
Just in the blue there.
I'll try and squeeze your one in, if it's a quick fire one.
All right there. I got a question for Nav, again. And I do think it could spread to Ama as well. Both of you guys talked about Nav with your business and Ama with your new job. You said you received some support, Nav with RS Group as well. Yeah. I was just wondering, how did you go about finding that support, and what did that support help you do with your endeavors in your washing machine project and your career?
Do you want to go first and I'll go? Okay. So at the time I was building these washing machines, I was buying these products off the RS website, and I got invited to do this event 4 years ago. I did the event, and then Isabella came up to me and said, why are you buying our products? We can give them to you and donate them. So that was the kind of first starting point of the RS Group collaboration, and now they're our flagship partner, and we're impacting many people around the world. But that being said, before that, I used to write to people in the community. I said, could you give me 500? Could you give me 1,000? Could you give me 10,000? And people used to give it, and if you don't ask, you don't get. I think that's really important. And we're all from diverse backgrounds in this audience, and the support for diverse people is growing. It's not enough, and it's not fair, but it's growing, and I think you should tap into those channels. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, same. It's proactivity, really. It's finding what it is that you want to grow into and looking for opportunities around that. I mean, my very first job, I sort of joined a small group of students at the university who were all wanting to be an engineer, so mechanical engineers, the young members panel, and I'd heard from people that they were consultants. At the time, I had no idea what that meant, because I just wanted to be an engineer. And that actually paved the way for my first role, because I realized that it meant that I could explore different projects in one job. Normally you'd go to a company and you're creating one type of thing and that's all you do. But as a consultant, one day you have a project for thing A, then thing B. So it's just sort of finding those connections. And I think it's important to try and tap into connections from, say, a day like today, see what other people are doing, and then carve your way from that. It really will be a lot of proactivity on your side to look for what's out there and charter the way for what's closest to what you want to do.
Very good, thank you. We'll squeeze one more in from the lady at the back in the blue.
Chuck it. Dash.
Oh.
Almost.
Nearly. So we'll take the question for one person.
I really like epigenetics at the moment, and I was wondering if I do a biomedical engineering degree, is it more related to that section, or if in the future I'm not into that, would I still have a broad, choices of different sections I can go into? So if it's better to do biomedical engineering or chemical engineering.
What is the area that you wanted to do?
Epigenetics.
Yeah. It's really up to you. So in the biomedical engineering industry, you'll learn about biology, you'll do the chemistry, you'll actually be able to pick and choose some areas as well. Most programs will allow you in your third and fourth year to pick some other areas that you want to complement. So it's good to know that those areas, both the chemical engineering will lead you to that, the biomedical engineering will lead you. There's also biochemical engineering, which might actually allow you to be closer to bring those two together. So it's worth having a look. But the nice thing about some of these courses is that actually in the first year or two, they structure it. But as you go into your third and fourth year, you will be able to pick some subjects that bring it closer to where you want to go in the future. But then again, like we've said, all those transferable skills mean that you're not going to be left hanging. You will be able to pursue that and start to go into it. So we can talk a little bit more if there's a particular area, but I think biomedical, chemical, biochemical engineering, all of those would be good for you.
Amazing. Well, let's give both Nav and Ama a round of applause. Thank you both. Thank you.